So, I hit level 120 in BfA. Let's talk about it. This is MultimediaJay Radio Style for Saturday, October 19th, 2019. Let's start the show.
MultimediaJay Radio Style.
Ladies and gentlemen, yippee skippy, I did it! I got to level 120 in World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth. Yay! Well, I can check that off the old bucket list. So how does it feel? Whatever. Anyways, I originally came back to this game for Classic. Classic got me curious about what's been going on since I've been gone, and I leveled through some of the stories in Kultiris, still have Zuldazar and the Zandalari areas untouched on my Horde character, but I have some, of course, loose ends to tie up in terms of my discussions from earlier. BlizzCon, of course, is coming up very shortly, and the big thing that I'm looking for is the announcement of the next expansion and what Blizzard decides to do in the next expansion, because this is Blizzard's #1 chance to prove that they've learned anything at all from the launch and success of WoW Classic. And quite frankly, I don't think the devs have a choice in this matter, because this is another one of those situations, like I mentioned before, where someone is either malicious or incompetent. And given some of the publicity about WoW Classic leading up to BlizzCon, like the article I posted on Twitter a while back from PC Gamer about how WoW's game director was talking about why Classic wasn't just a flash in the pan, I think Blizzard will look like total morons if they don't learn anything from what's gone on with Classic. As if they don't look like morons enough as it is from what's gone on with Blitzchung, and now US politicians are getting involved in this whole situation as well, on both sides of the aisle, but that's another discussion entirely. So, some highlights from this article that I posted on Twitter a while back about Ian Hazzikostas being interviewed and talking about Classic and things along those lines. This is funny. It's funny because if this guy doesn't take action on this sort of stuff, he's officially an idiot who doesn't know a good thing even when it's right in front of his face. So here's what I'm looking to hear about at BlizzCon. So here's some excerpts here, huh? One of the things that's magical about it, part of it is the game systems themselves that lend themselves to cooperation. But another big part is the number of people who are approaching Classic with the mindset of it being about the journey. Yeah, that's something that the modern game needs more of, and quite frankly, any MMO needs that. It can't just be about getting to the good stuff. It has to be about the experience and the journey and the whole package, so to speak. MMOs have been responding to this since Guild Wars 2 put in what was essentially a raid boss at level 15 with the Shadow Behemoth, where here you are with a brand new character running around Queensdale, and the world boss event starts up, and you're fighting the Shadow Behemoth in the Forgotten Swamps or whatever it was called, and you're dealing with mechanics and other stuff at level 15 in an 80-level game. So this is the sort of thing that I'm being reminded of as I play through even Kultiris. Yeah, there's an outdoor world, there's decent stuff to do in Battle for Azeroth, but one thing I've noticed versus ESO is that despite ESO's world sharing some of the same problems as World of Warcraft with world difficulty, ESO's world seems more believable and more immersive, while WoW's world feels more like you're running around on a stage at paper props at a school play or something like that. And this was a criticism that I remember from the original PC version of Final Fantasy VIII when it was first ported to Windows, and it was a total disaster. Even Final Fantasy VII got more attention when it first came over to PC for Windows 95 than Final Fantasy VIII did, but one of the key criticisms was the resolution differences between the original PlayStation and computers at the time made it such that playing Final Fantasy VIII on PC was like watching some kids do a school play, because the world felt like paper props because of the resolution difference and how awful the graphics looked compared to the 3D rendered character models. I'm not saying that World of Warcraft is totally where that was with the way that Kultiris feels as you walk around in the zones doing the zone stories and other questy type stuff. But as you play through, you just get that feeling, even though it's a cartoon, that the world is a bit less believable than in something like ESO. Of course, ESO kind of has an advantage here because it has Skyrim as a potential source of inspiration on, what the style of the game should be like. So World of Warcraft coming from an RTS is at a bit of a disadvantage with that kind of stuff. But this is something that Hazakostas needs to use for more than just sound bites when he says stuff like this. Let's take a look at some other parts of this article here. Many players have already seen and done Molten Core. They can go in and one-shot Ragnaros on their level 120 characters if they want to. It's not about rushing to complete that raid. It's about wanting to experience the journey through the world. And when players approach the game with that mindset, it leads to an overall greater environment of positivity and cooperation and generosity. People taking time out of their schedules to make a bag for someone else or buff them or help them out with some quest boss they're stuck on. It's not always about efficiency and rushing to get to the end as quickly as possible. Well, duh. So what are you going to do in Modern WoW in the next expansion to address some of these things? That's the big question here. I did hit max level in BfA, but that's not to say that this experience hasn't had its downsides. For one thing, when I log into this game, as well as ESO, and one of the things that I plan on doing when I let my subscription continue for at least one more month is playing the Season of the Dragon release of Palatine and ESO Elsewhere alongside the world content in World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth, just to compare the two. And yes, while I'm on this topic, I have decided to keep my subscription going past October 20th, but no guarantees of anything after that, because seeing what goes on with BlizzCon and one more month should be more than enough to finish up the zone stories and other stuff, maybe unlock flying through Pathfinder or something, and decide if I really want to continue playing this game, which has fallen very squarely into the pattern of it's a half-decent game until you have to deal with its people. And that's really the ultimate problem I've had with BfA. Not the stuff people are complaining about, not the unlosable war fronts or anything of that sort, not the Titan forging, not the RNG, not any of that other stuff, but the minute this MMO requires other people for something, that's when the experience goes to crap, even in the outdoor world. And that's the real change from the discussions we've had before. Now that I'm level 120 and I'm in Stormsong Valley doing some quests over there, I'm running into the people that are trying to grind for the B mount. And there's people whining in the chat about, someone started the event without waiting for the group to form, and all kinds of other garbage like that. I also fooled around in, as this screenshot might suggest, the Darkshore Warfront area, which is currently under Alliance control, and checked out some of the rares and the mobs in that area. And as much as some talking heads like Heel vs. Babyface complained about Warfronts, once again the biggest problem I've had is people, of course. So, as a fresh level 120, still in the equivalent of blue gear despite the level 120 heirlooms that are out there, heirlooms are basically supposed to be blues, it really is hard to put into words the feeling you get when you want to start advancing in the endgame of BfA, and you keep running into all these people in raid gear thumbing their nose at you, doing 7 or 8 times the damage even as non-DPS specs, simply because of the power difference in gear. And then there was an incident earlier where someone joined a heroic island expedition and they got labeled a mooch by someone's add-on, and then the add-on automatically started a vote to kick thing to get them kicked because they were freshly 120 and stuff like that and didn't have any gear yet. And then, of course, there's the rotten experiences that I've had in the dungeons and the time walking and stuff like that, where everyone else does way more damage, and people will even go so far as to tell you to quit the game if you don't have any gear yet. You suck at this game. You should go play something else. And then I noticed the chat, too. When I go to the cities, I don't see guilds recruiting, and if they are, it's raiding guilds. And I tried joining one, and Of course, the old problem with joining a raiding guild as someone who's not interested in raiding reared its ugly head, and I G-quit within a couple of weeks. Not very shortly, that was something else I'm thinking of. But basically, what happened was, it's mostly raiders who only log in for raids, and they do absolutely nothing else in the game. So, here I am, wanting to help folks out with leveling alts or leveling for the first time or anything of that sort. The game just had Party Sync released, which lets you downscale to help people out and whatnot, and I have zero chance to use it because there's no leveling social guilds or anything that are recruiting on my server. Guilds are still limited by server, despite Blizzard's baby step attempts to unify their architecture, like the competing MMOs out there that use mega servers. So, can't find a guild to help people out because it's just raid teams at this point, and when I go through most of the world, the zone chat and whatnot, or the general chat in the zones, is completely silent because nobody's talking to anybody. I go to other places, people aren't saying anything. The only areas besides the major cities with people trying to sell things and whatnot, where I've seen regular use of actual socialization among WoW players, is the people complaining about the B Mount in Stormsong Valley. So there you go. There's the World of Warcraft experience in 2019. The game's halfway decent, but in terms of being an MMO, the minute players get involved, it suddenly goes to crap, even in the outdoor world. It's interesting because later on, Hazakostas gets back to talking about this kind of stuff in the article that I posted on Twitter. Let's see here. It begs the question of what, if any, aspects of Classic might find their way back into Warcraft's next expansion and beyond. Here was his response. I don't think this is the case where the lesson or the takeaway is to borrow specific mechanics directly or remove things that we added just to return to Classic, Hazakostas says. Classic is there for those who want to play it, and I don't think that, say, removing flying mounts permanently will suddenly endear World of Warcraft in the hearts of millions of players. We learned that lesson trying that a few years back. Oh, really? Hazakostas. That's what's called, ladies and gentlemen, a reductio ad absurdum, a reduce to the absurd. So, hey, maybe there's some things that Classic did better than the current game that should be reintroduced into the current game. Well, we don't want to remove flying. We already tried that in Warlords of Draenor. Oh, really? There you go. Classic narcissism in action right there. There is no such thing as a good idea that came from anybody other than people at Blizzard, no matter what the entire rest of the world says. So we'll see what happens at BlizzCon. And if BlizzCon is a disappointment, and right now my chips are on that it will be some kind of disappointment, but if BlizzCon is a disappointment, then I'm just going to wind down my involvement in this game again. Just play through whatever stories I want to play through until I get bored, because I can tell you right now, doing the prologue quest for Palatine and ESO, I want to play that game again. I want to play that game more again, and I want to make gaming videos about what I'm up to in that game. World of Warcraft doesn't have the same charm. There's a lot of work that was put into making Kul Tiras interesting, probably some work in the Zandalari areas as well, and maybe I could check out Nazjatar. But between stuff like this and the Pathfinder achievement containing mindless grinding that isn't really related to getting to the point where you've completed everything that the game has to offer, and now who cares if you fly and stuff, it really gets me wondering if it's a complete and total waste of time or hoping against hope that there's any chance whatsoever that any of the lessons that Classic has to teach Blizzard are going to be applied to improving the current game. And this is the part where people start talking about Classic Plus. And I'll tell you right now, the very last thing that the WoW player base wants is Classic Plus. It's also probably the very last thing that Blizzard IT wants because of version control issues and having to support and control multiple versions of the same software. I don't think elaborating onwards into Classic Plus from the release of WoW Classic, especially when Burning Crusade is already canon, is the thing to do. And I certainly don't think that World of Warcraft needs some kind of expanded universe to start these kinds of arguments about what's canon, what's, expanded universe or whatever, like what happened with Star Wars. I do not support Classic Plus, now or ever, And I think with the way Blizzard is nowadays, Classic Plus would essentially turn into a license for Blizzard to ruin the Classic experience by interjecting stuff they throw around today into what worked back then. I don't support it. There's only one road forward for this game, and that's for Blizzard to fix the modern game and keep the classic stuff as archival products. Because the way Blizzard has changed over the years is only the number one problem with World of Warcraft if that's the only game that you play. There's other stuff, such as some of the design choices versus other games, the way the infrastructure works, and the things that we've been talking about in these podcasts that barely anybody's been listening to, that matter a lot more if you actually have some perspective on things. So in a nutshell, okay, I hit 120. I'll see if I can find some fun somewhere in this world. But I think ultimately my MMO future is with ESO. The question is when. And what kind of comparison videos do I want to make showing just how World of Warcraft is an old game nowadays before I finally just switch back to ESO for good? This is MultimediaJay, signing off. Thanks for stopping by.